All right, hi, and welcome to day one of your heart dissection. Like I said before, major bummer that you guys don't get to do this dissection because looking at the heart really helps you to understand what the heart looks like way better than pictures do. But I'll run you through this as far as how your dissection would, and hopefully you'll get a better understanding for that. So the first thing is that when we're looking at the heart, it says locate the myocardium. This is the myocardium. So we're talking about the muscle part of the heart when you're talking about the myocardium. And then we need to really make sure that we orientate our heart so we know what we're looking at, and we want to look at the ventral or anterior side and then kind of find that apex to kind of see and make sure we know what we're looking at. So first thing, if we look at, this would be the superior part or top part of our heart, and we can see these holes in here. Those holes are the major blood vessels that we're going to find out where those go. I'm going to stick my fingers in them. Yes, I know that sounds gross, but I promise I'll wash my hands. But to find that anterior side, what we're going to do is we're going to find a couple landmarks, and there's a couple things that can help us to do that. So the first thing is when you're looking at the heart, we need to find our major coronary artery, or where that would sit, the major blood supply for the heart. And that indent right here is where that coronary artery sits. We can then notice that we're looking at down here that pointing apex. And as we said, if this was, we're looking at a human, this side over here is their right side, this side over here is their left side, and that apex goes and it points towards their left hip. So now we have our apex pointing towards our left hip. We can see our coronary artery. We know that we're looking at the ventral or anterior side of this heart. Next thing that we have to do is find the four major chambers of the heart. And when people look at the heart, they're like, oh, well, here's a heart, okay? And these are the atrium, and these are the ventricles down here. Which actually, that's highly incorrect. When I said the atrium were little flappy things, that's what I mean. This flappy thing here, and if we turn this over here, this way you can even see better. This flappy thing right here, that's the atrium. The atrium are incredibly small compared to the ventricles. And these are just the receiving chambers. Eventually, when I cut those open, I'm going to show you, you can kind of already see how thin these atrium are compared to the major muscles of the ventricle, but when I cut them open, I'll show you. You can even, when I stick my finger in there, you're going to see that you can see almost my finger as I stick it through. If when I stick it through here, it's going to be really hard because it's very muscular. So, looking at the heart, over here, we have our right atrium. Here we have our left atrium. Down here, we have our right ventricle and our left ventricle. When we cut this open, you'll see the septum that separates those on the inside. All right, the next thing that we need to do is that we're going to talk about all these different arteries and veins that are on this heart. I'm going to tell you, so these are hearts from pigs that have been butchered. As you can see, there's actually a slice in this heart already from being butchered, and even some of them are missing their atrium, and usually the hardest ones that we're going to have to find are the pulmonary veins. So I tried to pick a really good heart for where we're going to see it. We're not going to see the vena cava and the pulmonary veins, but we're going to see where they actually enter into those atrium by seeing holes in them. So the first thing we can talk about is on the right atrium, because that's where we start, right, is that we have the vena cava. Again, we're not going to see the vena cava where you have the inferior and the superior, but you could see here, here's a hole that is entering into those atrium. I can stick my finger in there, and then eventually I can stick it out the bottom side. If we could look at this, and that being my finger, that would be the superior to inferior vena cava that is entering into that right atrium. That's another kind of way to help you figure out where the anterior part of your heart is by finding the atrium that has the two holes on them, because one of the two holes that go above and below, that's going to be the right atrium. So we know that this is the right side of your heart and this is the left side. So that's where the vena cava would enter into your right atrium. When we're looking at the pulmonary veins, we need to kind of flip our heart over. There's actually two holes in this one also. But if we can look at These holes up here, we can kind of see it, this major hole here and a hole down here. There's two pulmonary veins that are going to enter into that left atrium that is blood flowing from the lungs in the end. This hole in the back, that's actually from the butchering process. But so then you have your pulmonary veins that are going to enter into your left atrium. Now, the other two that we need to talk about are the pulmonary artery and the aorta. You see that they're pretty large here and they're right next to each other. Again, I'm going to orientate ourselves. Here's the anterior part of our heart with that apex towards the left hip and our coronary artery. So when we look at the top of the heart, we have two holes that are stacked on top of each other. The best way to tell which one is which one's the aorta, which one's the pulmonary artery, is to then stick our finger into those holes and then see where they go into the heart. So I'll take this first one, and if I stick my finger inside there and I look at where my finger is extending into, okay, that first hole, stick my finger in there, and I can see that it's going into the right ventricle, then I know the right ventricle eventually gets blood from the right atrium, pumps that out, and pumps this blood to the lungs. So therefore, I know this hole, that's going to be the pulmonary artery. When I take and I stick my finger into that next hole, and this one's going to be really hard, but you can see that it goes in and it goes into the left atrium over there. That's my finger moving, right? Then I know that the left ventricle eventually takes blood and it pumps that out of the aorta. So the best way to do that is stick your finger in there and see which ventricle your finger is eventually going into. So this first one, the one closest to the anterior portion, this hole, when I stick my finger in there, goes into the right ventricle. I know this is the pulmonary artery, and when I stick my finger in this one, it goes over to this other side. You can see me moving my finger over here. I know that that is the aorta. So talking about all of the major blood vessels off of the heart, we have the holes, if I stuck my finger through there, for the superior and inferior vena cava. We have this one that goes into the right ventricle, which is our pulmonary artery. We have this one that goes into the left ventricle, which that is our aorta, pulmonary artery in front of the aorta, and then in the back of the left atrium, we have our pulmonary veins. Okay, that is the external anatomy of our pig hearts. Dissection number 2 will be showing the inside of the hearts. All right, thanks guys. Have a great day. Bye.